I'd now ask our honorary degree recipient, Kenneth Cole, and Dr. DeSalvo to join me at the podium. Kenneth Cole is a celebrated American designer and a committed social activist. He is a visionary who believes business and philanthropy are interdependent. His global company, Kenneth Cole Productions, creates modern, functional, and versatile footwear, clothing, and accessories for young professionals. The brand is currently celebrating its 40th anniversary. Kenneth was one of the original voices in support of people living with AIDS in the 1980s and joined the board of AMFAR, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, in 1987. He assumed chairmanship in 2004. Under his leadership of 14 years, AMFAR was instrumental in significant breakthroughs in AIDS research for the betterment of millions globally. In 2016, Kenneth accepted an appointment as a UN AIDS International Goodwill Ambassador, a position he still holds today. In 2020, in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, he launched an initiative to address what was arguably an even larger pandemic, mental illness. The Mental Health Coalition is a coalition of the nation's leading mental health organizations, brands, and individuals who have joined forces to end the debilitating stigma surrounding mental health and to change the way people talk about and care for those with mental illness. The coalition's mission is to build a like-minded community who will work together to destigmatize all mental health conditions and enable equitable access to vital resources and supports for all. Kenneth Cole has used his globally respected business platform to serve the community in meaningful ways. For 40 years, he has stood up for social issues, doing what others didn't, and saying what others wouldn't, and we are all better off for it.
In recognition of his decades of social impact work and for his many contributions to the field of business and philanthropy, by the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Board of Trustees of Endicott College, I hereby confer unto fashion designer and social activist Kenneth Cole the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities pertaining thereto, honoris causa. It is now my distinct honor to introduce Kenneth Cole as the distinguished speaker for the Endicott College commencement.
Thank you. Thank you, President DeSalvo, and for those generously embellished and only slightly overstated sentiments. I also want to congratulate you for your extraordinary leadership and for having nurtured and created such an impressive culture of acceptance and belonging, and for your very trendy pink hat. I'd also like to congratulate the trustees, the faculty, and staff for the job you have done in shepherding this class through such turbulent times. I'm here to salute today's graduates who have overcome extraordinary challenges, circumstances to reach this milestone, as you know and you've heard. But I'll begin by saluting the ones who truly made this day possible, your parents and your loved ones. They put up with you graduates for 20-odd years, nurturing, dreaming, and quarantining with you, holding your hand when they weren't holding their breath. So please show your love and appreciation with a round of applause. First, a disclaimer. It's important that I confess that my remarks were not written by or influenced in any way by ChatGPT 4. That said, depending upon how this goes, next year's class of 2024 might just so be hearing from Digital Dave and ChatGPT 14. You may be wondering why I was chosen to speak today. Actually, I was asking myself the same question at one point. I'm not an alumni, an educator, or legislator. I'm a fashion person who started out in footwear, which you'll hear about shortly. But upon reflection, I have a clue. For years, you've been taught to act independently, to forge your own path, and to think outside the box. But as I look around, and I stood on that line as you all processed before, what do I see? I see every graduate wearing the exact same shapeless gown. Actually, the exact same unflattering shapeless gown right out of Harry Potter. And also wearing the same silly square hats. Ironically, the only thing distinguishing each of you from each other was your individual choice of what you chose to wear below the ankles. I'm getting the picture. Maybe that's why I'm here. That said, you've been through the proverbial eye of the storm, which was unprecedented and unfairly disruptive for you and so many others. You're about to embark upon a journey into uncharted waters, also known as the post-COVID world, a world where the destination is not as important as the journey, where you will be relying upon the unique instincts, intuition, and judgment that you've acquired over the years and honed here at Endicott. But I believe and will try to make the case that this experience will prove to have been extraordinarily meaningful, instructive, and immensely valuable for you and, in turn, the rest of us. I started a shoe business in the early 80s, in the middle of a recession and on the verge of a different pandemic, with a little bit of money and not a lot of time. I knew that most startup businesses fail in their first year because they run out of money before they're able to create any cash flow. I needed to move quickly, but first I had to decide on a name. So I named the company Kenneth Cole because I was advised at the time that one could usually get their own name registered, and there weren't search engines that one could default to see what was available and the potentially years to find out the results. And I knew that it would make my mother happy. In search of funding, I knew I had a better chance of getting credit from an Italian shoe factory that needed business than from an American bank that didn't. So I got on a plane to Italy and assumed I'd figure out next steps from there. I came back a month or so later with a credit facility and a collection of cool women's shoes. And now I needed a plan to sell them. In the shoe business at the time, there were 2 trade shows a year that all of the buyers attended, which meant I needed to be there. I had 2 options. I could rent a room at the Hilton Hotel, along with 1,100 other companies, 30 floors, 30 some odd companies per floor, or where I would invariably get lost and could hardly afford to begin with. And the other choice was to present myself in a big fancy showroom within a 2 or 3 block radius of the hotel, which I clearly didn't have the time or money. I needed a plan C. On a whim, I asked a friend in the trucking business if I could figure out how to park one of your 40-foot trailers in the vicinity of the Hilton Hotel, would you lend it to me? And his response was something to the effect, of course, but this is New York, jerk. You can't park a bicycle for 10 minutes in Midtown Manhattan, let alone a truck for 3 days. So I set out to problem solve. I called the mayor's office. It was Mayor Koch at the time. And I inquired as to how one got permission to park a 40-foot trailer on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street in the coming weeks. The answer was, sorry, son, they don't. You could only get permission if you were a utility company servicing the streets Con Ed, AT&T, or if you were a production company shooting a full-length motion picture, because we were going through an I Love New York campaign, then we probably still are today. So that afternoon, I went to a stationery store, changed my letterhead from Kenneth Cole Inc. to Kenneth Cole Productions Inc. at a cost of $14. And the following morning, I filed for a permit to shoot a full-length motion picture called The Birth of a Shoe Company. We opened for business a few weeks later on December 2nd on the corner of 56th Street and 6th Avenue with 2 New York policemen as our doormen, compliments of Mayor Koch, models who aspired to act, stanchions, Klieg lights, and a director. Sometimes there was film in his camera, sometimes there wasn't. In 3.5 days, we saw every important buyer in the industry and sold 40,000 pair of shoes. We were off and running, literally. To this day, the company is still Kenneth Cole Productions, and for 20 of those 40 years, we traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol KCP. I continue to tell the story because it reminds us of the importance of resourcefulness and that the best solution is rarely the most expensive and almost always the most creative. My business quickly grew, consuming all of my time and energy. But while my company was doing well, I often struggled with its significance. I used to remind my associates that no one actually needed what we sold, and they still don't. And if every shoe store in America closed its doors that afternoon, hardly an American would go barefoot for 20 years. But our job was to make them think they did, glad they thought it, and think it again, realizing that the fashion business is arguably a perception business. However, my personal struggle was how to make selling stuff nobody needed meaningful. Eventually, I realized that if I could make the work part of something that was important in and of itself, then the work would become important for myself, my associates, and our customers. In 1985, as you heard briefly, there was a dark cloud looming over the world. It was threatening to many, and a lot of people were getting too comfortable ignoring it. It was a virus that came to be known as AIDS. And it was killing people, predominantly IV drug users, and even more young gay men at an alarming rate, many of them in my industry. AIDS was on everybody's minds and not their lips. Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time, did not mention the word AIDS publicly until 1987, after 40,000 people had already died. I thought there was a need for a voice of reason to address this devastating stigma, which was at the root of so much grief and so many deaths. Not being a member of those at-risk communities, I was compelled to address the crisis of perception. So we created a public service campaign to address this pervasive stigma, significantly the fact that nobody was talking about it. The campaign was called For the Future of Our Children, was shot by Annie Leibovitz, featured some of the world's best known supermodels and children, two traditionally unstigmatized populations. Most admire beautiful women, and we love all children. We don't, until, of course, they get old enough and have opinions, and/or we have to pay for their college tuition. At that time, the largest organization committed to finding a cure was the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR, who I chose to support and advocate on behalf of. As you heard, I joined the board, I became its chairman, and then I went and then accepted an appointment from the UN. In the 1980s, AMFAR has had, and also, as you heard, a profound impact on the lives of millions of people around the world, many of whom are still HIV positive and are living relatively healthy lives today because of the innovative research we did then. The whole experience, it changed me, it changed the man, it changed the brand, and it changed the company in a profound way. I found that I was no longer just running a company with style, but a company with a conscience and a purpose. I had found a voice that has helped guide my journey ever since. For me, it all quickly became about not just what we stand in, but what we stand for. And it also made me realize that it would be great to be known for our shoes, but even better if we were known for our soul. A few years ago, Thank you. A few years ago, I came to realize there was still 1 in 200 people in the world today living with HIV. But according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 were living with this condition arguably more dangerous, more pervasive than AIDS or COVID, called mental illness. I've quickly come to believe that it is more like 4 out of 4. Because if it isn't you, it's somebody you love, somebody in your family, in the community, or in the workplace. And we're all living with it. And because of the related debilitating stigma, 2/3 of those struggle in the proverbial shadows. I believed that we could change perception of mental illness, even if in a small way. Just before COVID, we set out with my daughters and a couple of associates, and we formed the Mental Health Coalition, and which has become the largest coalition of mental health service providers in the country. You can research and/or follow it on Instagram or on its website. Our goal is to destigmatize mental illness, change the way we talk about and care for people with the disease. Earlier this year, in an effort to change perception in a partnership with Meta, we did a study in the form of a campaign to raise awareness for mental illness, which resulted in 550,000 people acknowledging for the very first time their willingness to explore their own mental health struggles and others, as well as others, and even more so to expressed their openness to access critical resources. According to Meta, this has never been done before, totally unprecedented, to affect people's opinions in such a meaningful way, the way we were able to do it. As more and more institutions today address the challenge head-on, some places have turned to trained psychologists, some to wellness professionals, and then there was even a prestigious school in Massachusetts that had the vision to recruit a standard poodle named Gary. Endicot's own beloved comfort dog. Let's hear it for Gary. The world has gotten very small, amazingly acceptable, and at the same time, dangerously vulnerable. You saw how a single virus brought this great interconnected world to its knees, and you also witnessed the courage and compassion that carried us through. I can assure you that COVID-19 will not be the last crisis you will be forced to encounter. Change is happening at a much greater pace than ever before, and at a greater rate than we have the ability to process or adapt to. Disruption is the goal of almost every new and existing business. Social media has been great at connecting people and building communities. Many may not have survived COVID's extensive quarantining without it. It has also turned us all into our own brands that you curate every day on your TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snap, and Twitter feeds. You don't just curate the content, you even curate the audience. However, it's reported that teens today are spending an average of 9 hours a day looking at screens. Especially alarming when you acknowledge that they're only awake for 16. 2/3 of all teens today have also been determined to be better connected than ever, but also chronically lonely. And 25% contemplate self-harm and/or suicide every year. Can we ignore this? And if so, for how long? Then there's artificial intelligence. AI is challenging everything we do and possibly even our existence. Many are mobilizing and try to slow this down, not sure how that's even possible. We live in a world made by unintended consequences. 140 years ago, the first cars were created, a major contributor to the mighty American economy. It took 100 years, however, to realize the irreparable impact cars were having on the environment and the planet. To say nothing for the 1.3 million lives lost every year due to auto-related accidents. Was it worth it? Most might still say yes. But could we have done it differently, more thoughtfully? Could we have been more sensitive to the conceivable consequences, especially the social, environmental, and human costs? Those are the same questions you, class of 2023, are going to have to answer soon and for the rest of your lives. Soon you will commute in driverless cars. All your packages will be delivered by drones. You will shortly have the ability to choose the sex of your children, apparently even their eye colors and certain personality traits. And it is believed that many of your grandchildren could live to be 150. Will we have a health and medical infrastructure to support and enable this? With all the changes coming comes significant uncertainties, many of which will be hard to address and manage. Human beings are by nature able to accept yes or no, but we do not do well with the unknown. We are living in a time of institutionalized uncertainty. That said, I believe you are uniquely prepared for this new challenge. You've learned to respond calmly to crisis with clarity. You've learned to be resilient, to pivot, and to keep moving forward. You've learned that being vulnerable is a strength. You've learned that climate change is frighteningly real. You've learned that social justice and global health are crucial to our future, and that without acceptance, diversity, equity, and inclusion, our society cannot endure, let alone thrive. You've learned that the only certainty is uncertainty, that the only constant is change, and that understanding these truths is not only not paralyzing, but oddly empowering. You are familiar with all of the enhancements that are coming from so much change that we are currently experiencing, but you are also familiar with the many threats that accompany them. The list of concerns is long and frankly daunting. Sometimes when it seems like there is no answer, that's the best time to create one. And you're just the ones to do it. There is a Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Today, you're ending one chapter of your life. Tomorrow, you'll start to work on the next. I will now offer you some untested, unproven, and somewhat random advice as to how to best navigate your road ahead. First, be the creative alternative. When you take off these generic robes, find your trailer story. Number two, embrace change. Don't be changed. Don't disconnect from what makes you, you. You have the courage and discipline to be the brand you would want to friend, like, post, pin, share, snap, tweet, or retweet. Learn to keep learning. In the last 4 years, you have probably learned a lot, perhaps even more than you realize. But I assure you, what you will need to know to realize the success you will want, you haven't learned yet. Hopefully you've learned that. Be the community builder we all need. We are living in fragile times. The world is in disarray and in need of repair. Arguably, both our democracy and our humanity is at stake. And our planet and our collective health, both physical and mental, is as well. If you make community building and giving back part of your journey, I guarantee you that the destination will be way more rewarding spiritually, culturally, and even financially. Trust yourself, challenge the ordinary course. Ask the tough questions, and then ask them again, and if necessary, again. I'm reminded of a story I once heard of why a bird sits confidently on a thin branch. And it's not because he trusts the branch, but because he has confidence in his ability to fly. Invest in yourself. You have what it takes. Be a moral and ethical force for good. We're at a pivotal moment in time. We're in dire need of responsible and moral guidelines as well as ethical leadership. That can only be created by determined cultural and ethical crusaders. You are uniquely positioned to lead the change needed in the world you are entering, which will offer unprecedented opportunities for those who are prepared and have the courage to do so. I thank you for your attention, for the privilege to share my thoughts with you on this special day. And I'd like to leave you with a favorite anecdote of mine. It's a story of an old gentleman who was driving down the Massachusetts Turnpike one evening, and he gets a call from his hysterical wife, who goes on to say to him, "Honey, you better get home fast. I just heard on the radio that there is a lunatic on the same road you're on, driving in the wrong direction." He paused, not wanting to alarm her unnecessarily, and finally said in a very calm voice, "Darling, it's worse than that. There are hundreds of them." You should know that much of my journey I have felt like that lunatic, and you might too. The lesson here, graduates, is that even if you find yourself going against traffic, you may still be heading in the right direction. So fasten your seatbelt, keep your eye on the road, and dress appropriately. Congratulations, Endicott College, graduating class of 2023.
Carafano. Caleb Jackson Carter, cum laude. Abigail Julia Cassidy, magna cum laude. Cameron Robert Catanazzo, magna cum laude. Anthony Samson Ceneviva. Kyle Thomas Chandler. Justin Alex Cohen. Cameron James Connolly. Amanda Ray Cooper, magna cum laude.